But okay. So we always talk about diversification and baskets. So in a typical strategy, is there an ideal amount of underlying securities that you would want to keep? Is more better or is less more efficient?
In the covered call space, there is a bit of a sweet spot. Diversification is great when you have a mass amount of assets or a number of underliers, but then that
Hmm.
becomes quite difficult to manage operationally from options perspective.
Yeah.
So for us, we would focus, 20, 25 names is really a nice key number because it really targets good diversification at the same time, not too much effort on the operational side, but
Hmm.
also focus in on maybe the better vol names or certain names that have better options markets. Not all of the underliers that we trade, for example, in an index would have an options market
Hmm.
or a liquid options market. So
Okay.
depending on the size of the fund or the size of the underliers that we trade, it is something that we have to look at.
Hmm. And from my understanding, the biggest and the best options market is the United States, the U.S. market. Can you give people an idea of how the difference between the U.S. market works, the options market compared to maybe the Canadian options market?
Absolutely. In the US, like you mentioned, it is the biggest, it is the most liquid. For us, anything we need to transact in the US, there's no problem. There is no size constraint. We're not big enough. Our funds are not big enough for that. You can do, billions of dollars in the US, no problem. In
Hmm.
Canada, especially the options market in Canada, can be a little more challenging.
Yeah.
Um, we also see the trickle-down effect of our options positions into the underlying equity markets as well. So not only the options market we need to take into account in terms of liquidity, but also the underlying equity markets as well. Because if they can't sustain the liquidity of the options,
Hmm.
then we're going to run into some situations.
Okay.
So that's always one of the aspects that we look at. And also another thing that we look at is the bid-ask spread in options. Right. In the US, it's fairly tight. On the Canadian side, it's quite wide. And that's why we have to have good relationships with our brokers and really
Hmm.
negotiate those pricing and get the best or get the optimal yield for the fund.
Okay.
Just as an example, if you take a bid-ask spread of a Canadian option, you can almost see a 5% call it per annum difference in the bid-ask, right?
Yeah.
When you look at compounding or yield-based. So you can see that how it can make a big difference in terms of, executing yourself or having kind of call it a professional or someone, an expert in the field to execute those for you.